3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
Hey everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Studio Life. Today we're talking about choosing a studio, primarily for businesses. There are so many businesses out there that are starting to think about the value of video in their business, whether they're talking about promoting products or promoting brand. Maybe you're out there talking about a podcast, you're trying to develop expertise. All of these are reasons why you might want to work with a studio, or at least studio personnel. Now, in some cases, you might not need an actual studio. You might think, well, your boardroom is just fine, or your living room is just fine. There are a lot of podcasts and broadcasts and corporate videos that don't ever walk into a studio. But studios offer a particular set of pros and cons. And today we're going to talk about some of those things that you get when you go to a studio and choosing your studio. Well, let's get right into it and let's talk about the role of a studio. The number one role of a studio is to be your partner. It's very rare that somebody who is overseeing a corporation, overseeing technology, overseeing whatever you're overseeing is also skilled at overseeing how microphones work and microphone placement and how to handle noise reduction and camera placement and camera color profiles and thinking about editing. The thing about this particular function, being in a studio, is that it's complicated. Every one of those things that I just named is another actual job. There are people who only worry about microphones, people who only worry about editing. And one of the things you get when you go to a studio is a partner. Somebody that takes the burden off of your shoulders and replaces it with your ability to focus on preparing, whether it's to write the script and figure out what your tie will look like. You leave the tech to other people, and that's the advantage. Now, in some cases, that's going to change. It's going to vary depending on what you're looking for and what you need from the studio and what your end product's going to look for. But the number one thing you're looking for is somebody who's out there looking out for all of your interests, so that you don't have to worry about that stuff. So number one, find the right partner. You might think about a partner as maybe somebody who knows how to use the camera, right? That's the role of the studio, but that's not entirely the role of a studio. A lot of people know how to use cameras. The goal is that the people who use the camera also are using their eyes, they're using their ears, they're using a set of skills that allow you and your team to focus on other things. Like your marketing person might be on set to think about marketing. You might have somebody else on set who's thinking about making sure that everybody gets lunch or whatever, and people may not be paying attention. And one of the things that you're looking for out of your partner are people who pay attention. They're looking at whether or not the hairs are out of place or the jacket is unbuttoned. They're looking at all the things so that you don't have to look at them all. And it's an extra set of eyes. Maybe you're looking at them too. And the more people who are paying attention, the better. This is in large part what a partner really is. It's somebody else who cares just as much about your success as you do. The second thing to think about when you think about what you're looking for in a studio is, what are your goals? It's amazing to us. We work with so many clients, so many corporations, so many individuals, so many podcasts, and they walk in and they're ready to go. And then you say, well, what does your final product look like? And they don't know. Now, you don't have to know all the answers, and you can rely on your partners, the studio, to help figure out what that's going to look like. But the truth is that there needs to be an idea of where we're going, because otherwise, what are we doing here? If we're talking about interviews, we're talking about B-roll, we're talking about whatever it is, we need to know what we're doing, how we're going to capture that, what the process is going to be in order to move it to a timeline and edit it. And we need to know, how long does it have to be? How in depth, how engaging are we looking at people who are looking off camera or on camera? All of these things, we're going to talk about them all, and you don't need to know what they all are. But the bottom line is that if we don't know what we're trying to do for you, then nobody is worrying about crossing that end line, and we don't know what we're going to come up with. And the last thing we want is for somebody to be disappointed. So know your goal, or take some time in pre-production and let's all talk about it. Let's figure out where we're going so we can be sure that we're going to get there. Now, let's continue along the lines of what your goal is, because I have to tell you, this is not some light topic. We have clients who walk in this store and they say they're looking for a video that is beautifully shot and it resembles everything they want. And then they say, well, how do we use this for social media? How do we cut a slide from vertical to horizontal, horizontal to vertical? All of these things, they matter. And if they're not done on the front end, then we are left to struggle and figure out what we're going to do on the back end. If there are too many words on that slide, you can't just slice it. You can't just throw it in the top of a vertical social media post and expect anybody to see it. This takes planning. Now, we can plan up front, we can work on it in post, but if you want to be efficient, we should be sitting down together and working through the process so we know we can be the most efficient for you. And our expertise, being that we know how to shoot, we know how sound works, but we also know how to edit, means we might have a lot of ideas when it comes to the edit for things you should be considering now. We don't edit after we're done shooting, but an editor's paying attention to that. They're watching and listening, and they know, oh, wow, that might be a little hard to edit. So why don't we rethink about how we do that now? These types of things are the expertise, the partner that you're looking for. This is the team that you're building, and this all comes together and hopefully something that saves you money and ultimately is a better product, or maybe we should say is a better product and hopefully ultimately saves you money. Now, as we talk about partnerships and goals, let's get into number 3, which is what team is on site. And that team is led by the stage manager. That title can vary, but ultimately there's going to be somebody involved in this process who essentially is a project coordinator. That person is responsible for all of the components. Now, on a lot like ours, we have security, we have parking that we have to consider. We have all of these components that we have to make sure about. We also want to make sure that we have water and coffee available. We might be talking about whether or not there's a requirement to have some other form of catering. We might need certain equipment on site. All of that stuff is not only part of the pre-production, but that pre-production has to translate into action. That person is in the business of doing the translation, working with your team and making sure that it's all ready to go. That's where the team starts. Secondarily, you have camera people and audio people. Now, those people are going to become your primary team at some point. At some point, you have to look at who is responsible for the quality of the picture. That is often called your director of photography. Now, it may just be a camera person. You might be your own director of photography. And the great thing about cameras is you can see the picture too. Everybody can see the output, and that's fantastic. But ultimately, your team is going to give you the best advice possible. And that means translating. It means hearing what you have to say and knowing how to make that happen, how to adjust the lights or the camera settings or the audio in order to achieve that goal. And that's where a better team typically stands out. It's not just in knowing how to turn a camera on, but it's in translating the idea into reality. And somebody who knows how to do that will do it a lot faster with less randomness, less room for error. And when you get home and you look at the final edited product, a much more likely result that doesn't take 10 different iterations in order to overcome. So your team is there to make sure it's the best it can be on the first pass. And when you say you want more shadow or you want more of a mysterious look, that person interprets that and creates something that will ultimately, hopefully, get closer to what you're looking to achieve. So start with the project coordinator, the stage manager, and get that team built so that you're ready to go, because the stage, the production environment is complicated. We're going to talk about that. And so all of these pieces, if they're efficient, if they're working, then it's going to make the whole rest of the day 1,000 times easier. Now let's get into some of the actual components of a stage, because some of these things are things you may not have in your living room, in your boardroom. And the first thing is soundproof. It is amazing how much sound microphones pick up. And so the number one thing that a soundstage should offer is soundproofness. Now, it doesn't need to be perfect. As a matter of fact, in today's environment, most stages are not perfectly soundproof. Some sound gets through. And our job is to make sure that so little of it gets through that it is the least amount of disruption. And we could talk about noise reduction. We could talk about how we handle some of the sound that gets through and whether that impacts us or may make us stop camera roll. But being as soundproof as possible is really going to allow you to be the least disruptive. Secondly is space. Now, it's easy to assume that you need the most possible space, but the truth is there are many TV networks in the world that operate out of closets. There are entire networks that shoot on green screen in the space half the size of your garage. Space is sometimes one of those things that is a myth. You think you need all the space, but in fact, you may not. Yet with that said, you do need the space to comfortably work. If you need a 3-camera shoot, you need room for the 3 cameras. Let's say one of them is a wide, 2 of them cross so that you have 2 different looks. Maybe something like this might be an example where you need another angle that may be coming from this direction. All of these things require space. Cameras cannot be super close to where you are. They need to have room to breathe. You need room to move. And so all of these are things you should consider. Now work with your partner and ask whether something is possible. Make sure that what you think is true, because we can do a lot of things that are, it's truly movie magic around here, but having the right amount of space. So we talked about audio, we talked about space. You might need internet access, especially if you're doing live streaming or you're tying in directors or producers or marketing personnel or your CEO from some other location. You might need to make sure that really works. And you might need a team that knows actually how to do that in real time to create multiple camera angles and send that all out or do live keys if you're on a green screen. You might need a kitchen. You might need a dressing room. You might need a makeup room or space. You might need a makeup artist or a place where someone can change their clothes. You might need room outside. You might need, who knows what you need, but make sure that when you go and work with that studio that you are getting what you need or that reasonable accommodations are being made for you. Because again, you're investing a lot in this and your job is to walk away, whether it's that day or that week or that month, knowing that you've achieved your goals. There will be a contract put in place, hopefully, and you'll have the chance to talk this through. But sit down with that project coordinator or stage manager and really talk about this, because once you get here, not a lot else can change. And now let's talk about something else that is often a focus of discussion when stages are reserved, and that is gear. What kind of gear do we have? What kind of cameras do we have? What kind of lights do we have? Now, it is weird to say, I am a gearhead. I love gear. I think gear is the coolest thing ever. If I can spend every penny of my kids' college education fund on gear, I would if I thought I could get a good resale value. Gear is awesome. And yet, it really does not matter like you think it does. And it hurts my soul that some of the things I've purchased have been replaced with things that are as simple as an iPhone or whatever. But gear should be secondary. If you've hired the right crew and you've talked it through and you know what you're trying to achieve, then it's quite possible that any gear that they don't have can simply be rented. Now, it's nice, obviously, when a studio has everything you need, like ours. We, for the most part, have everything people need. We've got pretty incredible lights and cameras and whatever. But if your decision is based on the gear, then you're really kind of missing the point, because it starts with making sure that you're in the right place to get the job done and you have the right team put in place. Now, if you are looking for live cutting, you do need to know that whomever you have has the right kind of switcher to do that, or can get the right kind of switcher and has the right kind of know-how. In this particular case, I'm doing a lot of this particular episode by myself, which means I have the ability to move cameras around. You say, hey, check that out. It's good. It's good. We can move this thing around. We can accomplish your goals because of the gear we have. And so I don't want to discount the gear. Having a great quality lens and all that, it really, truly matters. It does start really, to me, with the microphones. If it doesn't sound good, it won't be good. because sound is what gives us our first headache. If your listeners are not hearing things at a good volume and it's noisy or it's too tinny, meaning it has too many high frequencies or whatever, to me, it contaminates the entire process. Many camera people go into owning a studio, running a studio without an audio knowledge. And that means that they may sacrifice audio in favor of picture. Make sure you talk to your studio about this. It's part of the consideration. Is this studio fully aware of how audio works? Or have they gotten great microphones? Because without that, to me, that's sort of the beginning of less than high quality product. From a camera perspective, we do like cameras that have nice big sensors so we can get shallow depth of field on more cinematic productions, that we have really good color representation. We do like to make sure that the cameras meet the needs, but there's no need to overdo it either. Making sure everything is 4K or 6K or 12K or 18K cameras is overkill. You can get away with things that are much less. And if a studio is paying attention to your needs, one of the things they'll do is they'll discourage you from using things that are just too much. They take up too many hard drives. They require too many breaks in order to copy things to hard drives. They get in the way. The goal here is to make sure that your team is helping you make sure that you have the right gear for the job. Another piece of gear to consider is green screen. Now, honestly, this is pretty ubiquitous at this point. You know, wherever you go, somebody can hang a green screen. There are some things that make certain studios better at green screen than others. The ability to light it correctly is paramount. If you don't have good lighting for a green screen, you don't have good green screen. Keyers, things that actually take the green screen away and replace it with a backdrop, those are really good these days. Again, talk to your studio. Green screen is a pretty common thing. Now, one thing I will talk about very quickly, and we'll deal with this in another video, but green screen's not the answer to all questions. There are a lot of cons when it comes to green screen. I mean, just look at me right now. See this? Green screen bounces. It's like a mirror. It bounces. If you could see a shine, it goes transparent. It doesn't work. Green screen is not the answer to everything that you think it should be. And you need a studio that talks that through. And a studio that's going to push green screen above all else may be leading you down a dangerous path because it may not look the way you want. If the green reflects around it, you're not going to have good outlines. If your hair is wispy, you're not going to have good outlines. If your company logo is green, you're not going to have good outlines. You might become transparent. Hey, it's worth mentioning, you could also do blue screen as well, and that may fix green problems. But one way or another, using something that's an artificial background is incredible. It's one of the greatest technologies ever invented in all of film and video, but it's not automatic. So talk to your studio, make sure they have what you need in order to achieve your goals, but still decide whether that's the right gear for you. One piece of gear we're asked about most commonly are teleprompters. Some teleprompters are like iPads. You have to actually use your finger to move them around, or you can hit the play button and they move at a certain speed. Other teleprompters are controlled by an operator, and that allows the operator to work with you, speed up, slow down, make sure that it's very interactive, and that if you decide to go slower, you can, because that's how people talk. They don't always talk at the same level. And then other teleprompters are voice controlled. And while many of them have a higher risk of error because sometimes they may not hear you perfectly, they're pretty remarkable because they do move at your pace. Each of these is a different option. These are the types of gear choices that allow studios to vary because this is the investment we put in. In our studio, we happen to have a couple of different kinds of teleprompters, but we make sure that all of them can operate in either mode 1 or mode 3. They can all be, you can hit play on all of them and have them move, but more likely than not, because we want a real quality product, we will actually operate those teleprompters. We want to make sure that your product is as good as possible, and that means that you have the right to speak like a human as opposed to speaking like a robot. So yes, gear matters, some more than others, but it's led by the crew. It's led by the people who know how studios work. So those are a few words on gear. We know it's so important to you, but it is less important to the final product. It's more important that you use the gear correctly, that the right people are involved in the right decisions for what gear to use, and that you're getting the very best advice. Another area where studios do stand out, before we completely leave the subject of gear, is in lighting. We happen to be using right now one of my all-time favorite lights. It's a lantern, as a matter of fact. Let me try to show you this lantern. There we go. See, check out that lantern. One of the advantages to this particular lantern is this gorgeous, even, flat, wonderful lighting. It's being housed in an aperture, one of the industry standard devices for projecting enough light into that in order to fill up the space. These are the types of gear things that I think have a direct aesthetic result. Now, your studio will not know what that aesthetic result is until you talk about it with them so they know what you're trying to achieve. Go to Google Images and pull up images and send it to the studio and say, can you do this? Do you have the gear necessary in order to accomplish this? And studios like ours, yeah, we're loaded with different lighting options here. We chose this lantern because it served our needs. It's a beautiful light for being able to put together a little podcast like ours. Lead with your images, lead with the things that you want this to look like, and let the experts help you make sure that can be achieved. And that'll wrap up our discussion of gear as we move to one of the things you care most about, unfortunately, and that's budget and cost. And now let's close on your most important thing. Hopefully you stuck around and you're here. And by the way, if you've stuck around this far, you know that this is the kind of stuff we talk about. So subscribe, right? You're here still, so you like us. You know, show the love. Cost leads most of our conversations with our callers that come in and they say, hey, do you have a studio? Yes. Are you available? Yes. What do you cost? Cost is complicated. When it comes to cost, studios vary in their models. The traditional model is you rent either a half day or a full day. The half day is going to be a little bit more expensive than the full day because we all want you to book full days with us. One of the other reasons why on half days we like to do this starting at first thing in the morning or first thing in the afternoon is because if we don't, we can't book anybody else. So a half day for us is like a full day. We may also be hiring crew, and crew may only be on full day rates. And so whether or not you're a full day or a half day, we may have to pay our crew a full day rate. And the reason for that is because they can't get another job. If we're bringing a crew down from, let's say, an hour north of here, they're going to drive home for an hour. They can't take another job that day. So it is a full day for them. But we want to give you the benefit of the ability to work on an hourly increment or a half day. And so that matters. That's what we try to do for you. Number two, there are a lot of consumables associated with a studio. For instance, what are we spending for you to be here? Are we using a lot of certain types of fabric to reflect light that end up getting thrown away that may be expensive and are consumables? They're tossed. Are we spending a lot of money on craft, on making sure you have all the snacks you need? Are we using paper or backgrounds that cost us money that are usable really for only your production and then we're going to toss? Are we using tons of batteries? What is the prep time? How many days in advance does it take to be ready for you? All of these are actual expenses incurred in order to make sure your experience is a positive one. Are you renting gear for you? So many studios, they approach cost and budget in the form of line items. They take your goals, your ideas, and they convert it into a series of things like a shopping list. Like you go to the supermarket, well, I'd like a pack of gum, I'd like a box of Cheerios, and they get added to the list. That's one model. It's a line item model. They figure out what things cost and then they bill them. Some productions are very small productions. We don't need to bring in a ton of people. Studios like ours, we're experts at doing live production with very small teams. Why is that? It's because most of our lights are pre-built. Our sets are pre-built. We use robotic cameras. We do all kinds of things in order to make sure that one person can handle the production. For instance, we talked about this lighting thing here before as we start to move this camera around. What camera am I moving? There we go. Let's move this camera. You know, all of these things allow us to not maybe have another camera operator on site. Every time we bring another person on site, that's another person we have to pay. So the smaller the crews. But when it comes to teleprompters, we always need somebody on our teleprompters, because even though I talked earlier about the fact that sometimes you can just hit play and that's the end of it, for us, the quality of the product requires really that somebody's there helping to work with the talent, work with you, your CEO, to make sure that the presentation is as good as possible. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to walk through all of this. What are the advantages to having a dedicated sound person versus not? What are the advantages to having a makeup artist or not? And many productions, many corporate productions, you won't tolerate things that are below a certain standard. If, let's say, the hair is out of place and that's going to ruin your whole experience, it's going to make the whole day worthless, then we should have somebody here who knows exactly how to do that function and pays attention to it. These are all really important components to your success. Other productions say, no. I'm going to check the mirror. I'm perfectly happy doing my own makeup. I prefer that. And that's great. There are pros and cons to that, and we'll talk it through. And if you're comfortable with that, then 100% that's what you should do. We can turn on those microphones and monitor it. We don't always need a sound person. We only need sound people for certain changes. Cost really to us is a question of how much does it actually cost us to deliver your product? Because we can very often figure out how to fit our services into your model in a way that meets your goals. And so those are all things to pay attention to. And so I hope at a very high level, that gives you a sense as to what cost and budget really means. But if we boil it down, help us. Tell us what you've got to spend and what you're trying to achieve. Let us work with you to try to figure that out. So that's it. That's at a high level how to choose a studio, things to think about. We have a lot more content coming because each one of these areas can be discussed. How to use a teleprompter, how to build a cost contract with your studio, insurance, so many things. But this went on long enough. Time for us to move on. Again, this is The Studio Life. I'm Mark here at Manhattan Beach Studios. We're thrilled to have you watch, and drop us an email, send us a comment. We do respond. We actually care enough about what we put out there so that we're interested in helping to support you. So don't hesitate. Drop us a line, hit that subscribe button, the like button, the follow button, wherever you're seeing this, come along with us for the ride, and we're here for you. Take care.
3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
Three,